Hey everybody, my next guest is a comedian, writer, and podcast host known for his unique perspective on the world and his ability to find humor in even the most unlikely places. Here he is, the one and only Danny Lobell. Danny, how you doing, man?
Good. Nice to be here with you. I like the shark head.
Yeah, thanks, dude. This is the set. This is a fake background. The set of Wayne's World. In fact, back in the day. So when we all went into COVID, and everybody had to leave the studio because we used to do this at the Govs Comedy Clubs. They have a studio in the back, but I'm about an hour out. I'm all the way out in Manorville. But once they locked us down, this was my homage to the kind of the first to do it.
Love it.
Yeah. But dude, man. You got so much going on. It's pretty cool. You got this fair enough comic book about your life, like American Splendor style, Harvey Pekar style. So tell me a little bit about this comic book, man. I think it's pretty awesome.
Thank you. Thanks for asking about it. I love doing them. I was a big Splendor fan. I saw the movie. I didn't know about American Splendor till the movie came out. Yeah, I saw the movie in 2005. Yeah, my grandma had pushed me to see it.
Yeah. I was going to say, Judah Friedlander. That was a great movie. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go
Judah,
ahead, man.
Paul Giamatti.
Yeah.
And I remember, like, I was a young fella, and my grandma, may she rest in peace, she was always hip to everything. But she was also a retired teacher, and she was always trying to educate me, and I've always been resistant to education. So she said to me, go see this movie, American Splendor. I thought it sounded educational. So I was like, I'm not going to go see that. And she's like, you're going to love it. You need to go see it. It's wonderful. You got to see it. I said, all right, I'll see it. And she could tell that I wasn't serious. So she put $10 in my hand, which was the price of a movie back then.
Yeah.
And she goes, here, now you have the money. Now you have to see it with this money. So I was like, all right, fine, I'll go see it. So I went to see it, and she was more than right. I absolutely loved it. I was just mesmerized. I went to see it 2 more times while it was still in the theater.
Boys, our next guest tonight works as a file clerk at a Cleveland hospital. He also writes comic books which deal with his day-to-day pains and pleasures, and this is an anthology of 9 of those comics. It's entitled American Splendor. From off the streets of Cleveland, folks, please say hello to Harvey Pekar. Harvey, come out here.
What do you mean calling me curious, I mean, I met you before the show, and
I meant curious in a fascinating way.
Oh, all right.
A man who has the presence of one who is quite fascinating.
Okay.
And then I was like, Harvey Pekar, may he rest in peace as well, said that he was proud to be in the phone book, in the Cleveland Heights phone book, in the movie. And I thought, I wonder if he's still in that phone book. So I looked up Cleveland Heights phone book, and I found his number, and I called him. I didn't have a plan or anything, like what I would say, or because I guess I didn't really believe he'd pick up.
Right, yeah, all of a sudden, he's just that easy to get a hold of him.
Yeah, one ring, and then I hear the voice of the guy from the movie. That crackly, hello, I go, what? I go, Harvey? In disbelief, and he's like, yeah? Who's this? I'm like, my entire mouth went dry from nervousness. I couldn't get words out for what felt like a minute, but probably was only a few seconds. I'd never spoken to anybody famous before.
Right.
And let alone someone who I was now obsessed with,
Yeah.
I was so inspired by the guy. So I think he must have I really felt like my heart was pounding through my chest. My whole mouth went dry. I couldn't get words out. I sound like Harvey.
Is this some kind of joke? What's going on here?
So I finally mustered up and he must have been able to tell I was super nervous. And I was like, yeah, I'm a young comedian. I'm really trying. I was, I think, 19 at the time. I said, I'm really trying to get my work published. I'd sent in some articles to different places, funny essays I wrote. and I never heard back from anybody. And I said, I really wish I could just do what you did and just put it out myself. And he just goes, you can. And I said, huh? Like, what? He's like, yeah, you can. He says, I did it. You could do it. He says, just make your own publication and publish yourself. And I said, okay, I will. He goes, okay, well, call me back when you do, and I'd love to hear about it. I said, all right, I'll talk to you then. And I hung up, and I was like, I just committed to starting a publication,
to Harvey Pekar.
Yeah, and I really wanted to talk to him again, because, like, once I wasn't so nervous, I had all my questions and everything. I'm like, but I can't call him again if I said I'll call you when I do it, unless I do it. So I started a magazine. I started a comedy magazine based on that phone call, which was called The Comical.
Yeah, man, that's how I know you from, yeah.
Yeah, you remember it?
Oh, yeah. That's how I know who you are, and that's how I've been following you all these years through The Comical, man.
So that's all because of that phone call. So then I talked to my friend Dave. He said he'd put up the money. I talked to DC Benny. I talked to a bunch of comedian friends of mine. I said, let's put together a comedy zine and put it out in the clubs for free and publish ourselves. And then I called Pekar and I said, hey, I'd love to have one of your comics in the zine. And he said, okay, I have a bunch of stuff that's almost never been seen anyway. You can publish this stuff. So he started giving me a page for every magazine.
Damn.
And I wound up becoming friends with and meeting George Carlin, Jackie Mason, all these people because of that magazine. And they're all dead. And
but they're all legends. And
but a lot of connections that are dead. Patrice O'Neill. Patrice O'Neill became a writer for my magazine every issue. I had this concept, of Dear Abby. I said it would be funny if we spoofed it and did Dear Patrice. And we'd ask him these ridiculous questions, and he gave these outrageous answers. And that column really took off. And his mom, we started growing our distribution to the tri-state area, and then eventually we also added Boston because we became partners with the Boston Comedy Festival. Jim McHugh and Helen McHugh
Jim
were
McHugh,
awesome.
I love Jim. Yeah,
they're awesome people. And so we started distributing in Boston. Patrice's family's from Boston. His mother randomly picked up an issue and saw her son published, and she was beyond proud of him for being published in a magazine, and called him and told him. And then he told me, you're like my brother now because you did this for me. You made my mom proud.
Wow.
So he and I became incredibly close because of that. And he was not a guy who got close with a lot of people.
Yeah, man.
Jackie Mason, I had this idea to do remember E! True Hollywood Stories?
Yeah.
I thought we should do Jackie Mason's True Comedy Stories. Because I had started hanging out with him a lot, and he had all these wild stories that nobody'd heard. So I started saying, let me record them and turn them into articles for every issue. So we started doing that. And anyway, all the while I really wanted to do was what Harvey Pekar did, which was to put out autobiographical comic books. But I also kind of felt he was alive, and it didn't feel like I should be copying him or something. I didn't want to step on his toes. He probably would have loved it, but as a kid, you're very self-conscious and stuff. So many years after he died, I kept thinking, I'm going to do it one day. I'm going to make comic books about my life like Harvey did. I mean, it's the coolest idea ever. And I just didn't do it until finally one day I said, well, you ever going to do this? Or, I told myself, you're going to do this ever? Or are you just going to continue to tell people that you're going to one day do this? So
yeah.
I got an artist for the first one, Amy Hay, and I wrote that story, but in more detail about that I just told you, about how I started the comical and how I got into autobiographical comic books through Harvey Pekar, and that was my first issue of Fair Enough.
That's cool, man. So the first episode of Fair Enough is explaining how you got the first episode off the ground. So it's that's so cool, man. Yeah, I love that.
A little meta, yeah. So the first issue, they're all available, by the way. If anyone's tuned into this and thinking I'd like to have one of these, they're at fairenoughcomic.com. You can buy them.
And I'll have the link in the description, too, for everybody. Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah,
That's
definitely
amazing.
get it. Yeah, I'm gonna get. I just saw that you have these comic books, and like, so I'm like, damn, man, I wish I would. I'm definitely going to get the was it 5 out now? Or?
There's 5 out now. I haven't put one out in a few years because I had an issue with the one that I was working on, which was number 6, which was originally supposed to be number 3. Just to give you an idea of how much of an issue it was, the artist that I was working with kept dropping in and out of being an artist, and it's the story of me being an intern at the Colbert Report, and so it was shelved for years because we only got 10 pages into about a 25-page story, and then the artist, who's a great artist, and I'm kind of hesitant to say his name because I don't want to embarrass him, but he dropped out of being an artist, and he had done stuff with Marvel and everything. He was like a really incredible artist, but it was so hard. It's so hard to make a living as a comic book artist. He wound up going and starting a barbecue restaurant in Ventura County. So
That's okay. That's a little different than
yeah. So anyway, so I just kind of got burned on that comic, and I didn't put out an issue for a few years now. And then the amazing Dan Schlissel, who runs the record label I'm on, Stand Up Records, he loves these comics. We got nominated for an award last year for Best Autobiographical Comic, and he's like, dude, we didn't win, but it was still prestigious. We got to go to New York to these award ceremony, and I got to meet all these amazing legendary comic book artists, and he's like, are you going to just quit now that you finally did something that got nominated for an award? I said, he said, finish the Colbert story. So I've recently just started working on finishing that with a new artist, and hopefully we'll have that one out by the summer.
What's great about doing these I would assume, I've never written one, but doing an autobiographical comic book is that you could pick it up wherever you, like, part of your story now could be like, yeah, the artist decided to go do a barbecue store, and I had to hold off on, like, you know what I mean? Like, you're almost, it's like in real time. It's
right. So we're having Eddie D'Angelini, he does a comic book series called The Collectors, which I love. He's going to do a transition in between the other artist's work and the new artist's work to tell the story of what happened to the book with the barbecue restaurant. Right. So yeah, it's like a reality show in a comic book.
Yeah.
But I'm so excited. This Colbert story is an amazing story because I was nearly fired as an intern at the Colbert Report, and I'll leave it all for the book. But it's wild how that happened. It's wild how it didn't wind up getting fired. That was a miracle. The whole thing changed the course of my life to this day in a profound way, even though I didn't get hired after the internship and nothing good came out of the internship with regards to, like, Viacom. Like, they didn't personally do anything good for me, but a lot of good stuff happened because it went wrong, and it changed my life. So it's a really good story to tell.
I love that success can come from failures, or things that go wrong ultimately lead to positive circumstances, you know? And it sounds like that's the case with this. I don't know how much you want to talk about this particular episode, but I would love to know more. Like, when you're working with Colbert, were you hands-on with him, and what was he like back then?
Well, I'll tell you this, and this is in the book, and I don't know if he'll like it if he ever sees it, but I assume he won't. But if he does, what can you do?
Right.
Before I got in trouble, before things really turned south, it still wasn't a good experience for me being an intern there. It was a cold environment, I found. And one of my jobs was to pick up Steven's lunch every day, and he loved these sandwiches at this Cuban sandwich shop. So I'd walk to this shop, stand in this long line, get these sandwiches. I don't think they weren't Cuban. The sandwich that he got, I think that it was a Cuban sandwich shop, but what they made for him was very not Cuban. It was a brie on a baguette with green sliced apple and ham.
That sounds like a Colbert sandwich.
Yeah. So they made these sandwiches. Maybe it wasn't a Cuban sandwich shop, now that I think of it. Maybe it was just a sandwich shop. I don't know why I got that in my head. But anyway, whether it was Cuban or not, it was a sandwich shop, and that's the sandwich I would pick up for him. And I would bring it to him, and he it was a walk-up building, so I walk up a few flights of stairs. I say that because I'm a heavy guy, so that's extra work. But but I would like knock on the door like sheepishly, and he'd be working at his desk, and I don't know if the room was dark or if it just felt dark in my memory, but it felt like a dark room with like light coming in from the window behind him, and he would just like point on his desk where to place the sandwich. And I would put it there, and then I'd just like wait, and he wouldn't say anything, and I'd leave. Wow. It was like, no, thank you, no, nice to see you, no, I appreciate it, or anything. Now, to be fair, he was also very engrossed in his work, and he was trying to put together a show for that night and stay on top. He had a hit TV show, so maybe the last thing on his mind was like to converse with the sandwich guy. I think that's a fair assessment of the situation, to give him both sides. But I do think it would have been nice if he had said thank you or something, yeah,
for sure.
So I always felt it was pretty cold, yeah,
I think when you hear stories like this, like the sandwich story, or you hear like a lot of these people, these talk show comics like Ellen or whatever, you find out that and maybe to your point, give them the benefit of the doubt, they're busy, they have other thing going on, but you always find out they're not the nicest to their staff.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's true with him. I think he may have been very nice to his staff, but and I think he was even nice to some of the interns. I just wasn't included in that group. So like, for whatever reason, even before I misstepped and things went and took a turn, I still was. I think I was the oldest of the interns. I was the fattest of the interns. Probably the schlubbiest looking of the interns. I was one of the only 2 non-Ivy League hires of the interns.
Yeah.
So I was like a little bit of a sore thumb, like I stood out, and I think it was a bit, to my understanding, it was an elitist environment, and I was not an elitist, and I'm still not, and I think that I was just not part of the cool kids club, and that's not an indictment on anybody. It's just the truth. It's just. And I'm not saying this to cover myself. I don't think that I'm going to burn any bridges that are there with Colbert. I don't think I have. I think those bridges, if they existed, they already burned. But I'm just trying to be fair as an adult looking back at the situation that was a nightmare situation for me as an intern there.
Yeah.
And it was very emotional, and I was drinking heavily because of it, and not because of it, because I handled things poorly. That's why I was drinking. But I was drinking a lot to get through it, but I just remember like it was not a pleasant environment to me, but it wasn't necessarily an unpleasant environment in general.
Yeah, I'm sure the Ivy League kids had a blast, and they have amazing stories to tell about it. But this is your perspective and your story, and I think there's something to it, though, especially for this kind of Harvey Pekar world, like view of the world, of being the outsider, being the curmudgeon, being the guy that is the one who doesn't, no one says hello to him and all that shit. There's something to that makes, ultimately, from a storytelling perspective, or from the comic book, or on the stage, being the outsider, being the one not included, is better ultimately for that standpoint as far as creativity, because I think deep down all of us feel that way, and that's how we connect to you. When we don't all feel like the Ivy League guy, even if you are an Ivy League guy, you still feel like inside you're the outsider. So I feel like you talk about the positive outcome of it all. I think the stories that you're creating a comic book out of it,
Yeah, I mean, it's a great story, and I don't want to ruin it for anybody. So like, there's just so much to it, and it's complicated, and I think I'm doing a good job of telling it through the comic book, but and like I tell you, I try to be fair. I think you're right. I think there's a lot of feeling of being outsiders in general, but there was clearly a clique amongst those interns, and they hung out outside of the internship. And another thing that's in the book that I could tell you is that we had a Christmas party for the Colbert Report, and it was above a bar in Hell's Kitchen where they rented the top. It was like a private room with its own bar, and they did open bar for everybody. They were very generous to the staff, and everyone was there, and Steven was there, and I saw there was a very attractive girl. I think she was from Texas. She was an Ivy League, very smart little, whip-smart little blonde girl, and this guy who actually wound up getting hired after the internship, who was a good shape and white guy. I don't know why I say he's white guy, but he was just a preppy white guy is what I mean to say.
Yeah.
Button-up shirt, really neat looking, really slick looking guy. And I just remember seeing those two with Steven laughing at the bar, and I never even had a 1 second positive interaction with the guy. So I walked over there to see if maybe I could through osmosis or something kind of get into whatever was going on there, but it was closed off. There was an invisible wall between them and me, and I still wasn't even acknowledged or brought in at all until I finally just walked away from it, because it was I was invisible, and they did not want me there. And I just so it wasn't even like he was mean to the interns. He was obviously, there were these interns that he was yucking it up with, and one of them got hired, and it was so what I can tell you is I can only speak to my experience. And I wonder if I was dropped into that internship today, if I would do way better, because I have better skills now, because I'm older and I've got better experience under my belt. But I can't know, because I was only working with the tools I had at the time. So,
But that's how you built your skill set. You learned from that.
Right.
You learned at a high level at a big show. The Colbert Report, Comedy Central, Colbert. Is at that time that show was doing great. His character, all that stuff.
It was the #1 show in the country.
Yeah, and there you are interning out of the gates on this show. So that's where you learned it. But has it affected how you treat the sandwich guy? How do you treat the sandwich guy now?
Well, I want to be successful like Steven, so I do exactly what he did.
This point.
No, yeah, of course it has, but I've never also been on that level of success. I don't know what I would be like. I don't know if I had all that pressure on my shoulders to put out a hit show every night, if I could even handle that, let alone do so with that kind of self-awareness that I wish he had had for me.
Right, exactly.
So I don't know. I might be worse. Right now, I'd be way better, because there's no pressure on me, really. And there's no, I don't have to deal with a lot of stuff and putting together a monologue and whatever it is, but studying who I'm going to interview. I don't have to deal with all that in a high-pressure situation.
Yeah, but...
So I might be worse. I don't know.
To me, it's being nice to somebody doesn't cost anything. And also, too, for me, I was working in the sporting world for a while, and when you have interns, you never know who those interns are going to become. Someday you might be asking that intern for a job or something like that. You know what I'm saying? The things change quickly, especially in show business. For all he knows, someday you're going to be producing a television show or a movie or something like that, or something he might be, interested in.
I think it was clear to them when they saw me that I had no future, so they were good. But no, I'll tell you, to your point, while I was an intern there, I had my, so the magazine was Comical Magazine. Then we started doing Comical Radio out of my college radio station. Became the first comedy podcast ever. And one of my interns, while I was an intern at Colbert, I had interns at my show. The two things were happening simultaneously. One of those interns was Andrew Schultz, who's now quite well known.
Yeah.
So he was my intern as I was an intern.
How did you treat Andrew? Did you treat him good?
I think so. You'd have to ask Andrew. I think I treated him well. I certainly got him a bunch of opportunities while he was an intern. But
yeah,
I don't know what life was from his perspective.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
But we're not close anymore, so maybe I didn't do a good job. You know.
Well, it could just be him too. He could just been like now that he's become successful.
Could be. I don't know. I still like him quite a bit, but I
awesome.
don't I don't have any relationship to him these days.
Dude, I used to when you did the comical, I think I still have a couple hard copies. I want to actually find them, dig them out.
Wow.
Yeah, I got to see. I wrote for like Uproar and a couple of Two Drink Minute, a couple other little startup comedy magazines. I'm not sure if I ever submitted to you or not back then, but I tell you what, man, I loved the comical. I love what you were doing, especially then, because there wasn't a lot of magazines that were covering comedians. And back then, dude, before podcasts, you can get any comedian. Yeah, like I remember when I was writing for like I don't know if you remember these magazines, Uproar, Two Drink Minimum, and then Good Times Magazine here on Long Island. I was getting Bill Burr on the phone before he was Bill Burr. He wasn't this Bill Burr.
Right.
He was. I had Dane Cook on the phone. All these guys I'm doing phoners. I can never now ever like it would be very difficult to because to get them on. But back then it was like because they wanted to talk to somebody, they wanted it. And I remember reading the comical, man. You guys were getting great stuff. You had great advertisements in there. It was just such a good lead for someone like me who was just getting really, really becoming a stand-up comedy nerd. It was perfect. So kudos to you for starting that up, man.
Thank you. Yeah, so we came first before all those other magazines, Uproar, Two Drink Minimum, Punchline Magazine.
Yeah, Punchline.
They all came after us because they perceived us as successful, so they thought, let me get in on this success. And they all found out the hard way that it was we were at the end of print media, like really, and it was a tough thing to do. The best we ever did was break even. We never. Yeah, made money.
When you're doing print, you got to pay for those magazines to get out there too. I mean, it's not like just having it like today. You can just put it up on Instagram or you know what I'm saying, for free.
Right. Yeah, it was a big expense to put out an issue, and it was a lot of work. So anyway, we wound up doing the podcast. Another thing I'm writing about in the comic book, which it's just a little anecdote, but it's funny. I brought one of my interns. So I was like I said, I was basically ignored at the internship. I was kind of talked down to. I became the schlepper intern. Like my job was always just to schlep stuff because I think they just saw me as a schleppy guy. Like if there were boxes that needed carried, they're like, I'll give it to the manual labor guy.
Right.
So so I just wanted everyone to know I'm funny too, So I thought, hey, it might be funny is if I bring one of my interns to my internship with me, and whatever they give me a job, I give it to my intern.
That's brilliant.
So I brought an intern to my internship, but they wouldn't let him in the building because he wasn't credentialed.
Be like, well, this is my intern. No, you're the intern. Yeah, but this is my intern.
Yeah. And then, it got around that day because security talked to someone of the producers, and they said, did you try to bring someone into the building with you this morning? I said, yeah. Well, what was that about? I said, well, he's an intern of mine. What do you mean he's an intern of yours? I said, I wanted to I have interns, so I wanted to bring an intern to my internship. I thought it could be helpful. They just looked at me like I was retarded, and they just said, don't do that again. They really thought they were dealing with a very low IQ person.
That's great.
Yeah.
But it's not great that they thought you were this low IQ person. But I love that you kind of were outsmarting them while they're underestimating you.
Yeah.
You know? So then what happened after that? Did Colbert catch wind of that, and did anything like happen?
No, that was not. Did I lose you there? Oh, okay. That was not a major incident. It was just one of those things where they shook their head at me, like,
right.
you know. But you know, unfortunately, there were worse things. But that was just one of my attempts to humanize myself that failed. But
yeah, you know, it's got to be crazy working on a show like that, and then being the schleppy guy, as you say. But I think now you're kind of getting, all these years later, writing this comic book, it's cathartic. You're probably getting it off your chest, and there's a sense of redemption out of it. I think it's an interesting story that people will find relatable on some level or insane. But it all worked out for the best in the end. It's also a good time to tell the Colbert story. Now that Colbert is kind of like in the news and his last legs on this show, and who knows what's next for him and all that jazz, and maybe karma got him. Who knows? We'll see.
I don't think he did anything wrong. I try to be very fair in the way I tell it, because like I said, he's a young guy, although he seemed like an old guy at the time to me. He was a young guy around my age now who had like the world on his shoulders. He had this massive, and then like he's got some moron intern who's bringing interns in and stuff, and like I think there's two ways to look at this, and I think I try to be fair about that in the book because I only saw the world through my perspective as a young guy.
Right.
I didn't really have the the emotional maturity to sort of understand maybe the world is bigger than you,
right.
So,
and that's a good point. And that's what I think makes you as an author and a writer, really strong, is that you are able to see things from different perspectives, but understand your POV, and all of that. But also I'm sure when you're writing it, you kind of taking into consideration, all right, I'm this young kid. For whatever reason, I'm in this box as this outsider, schleppy guy. So, maybe Colbert, didn't see me because I was invisible, or you know what I mean, or whatever, or wasn't relevant, or all that kind of shit. And I think we all, like I said before, we all kind of feel that way. So I think I'm looking forward to reading this, man. I think this is going to be pretty awesome, man.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I think it's maybe going to be my most powerful of the books. The other books are great too. Like they're all different. The second issue I put out was it just covered an afternoon where I just tried to move a heavy piece of metal furniture a few blocks by myself and encountered a homeless guy in my neighborhood in Los Angeles and everything that transpired in that afternoon, and that's it. It just covers that. And then the third issue was, I think the third one was the Thanksgiving one that I did, where I talked about the time that I broke into the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade with my then girlfriend, now wife, and we marched before we got kicked out for like 20 blocks. I mean, there's obviously a pattern of somebody who's a problematic person here, but
and they're all true stories, right?
They're all true stories. Yeah, we broke into the parade right in front of Santa Claus. We were on every TV station. The commentators were like, we walked like we were a presidential couple, like, walking to the inauguration or something. Oh shit, waving on either side.
That's great.
And leading Santa in the sleigh at the end of the Macy's Thanksgiving parade before we got caught and thrown out by the police. But so that was the third one, I think. And then the fourth one was a kind of just a touching story about the time I met Jonathan Winters, the late great Jonathan Winters.
Yeah.
and how that came to be, which was also insane. I stalked him, and
Was this in Ohio also? Like back to Cleveland?
No,
Where was he?
No, this was in Santa Barbara.
Oh, okay.
I didn't really stalk him, but it's the closest I've ever come to stalking somebody. I'll tell you, I wanted to meet him, and I tried going through all these different avenues of people who knew him, and no one came through for me. And I was realizing he's getting older and older. I'm never going to meet this guy. He was a hero to me. And I'm so close to him, yet I'm so far. Right. So I was living in L.A., and I knew he was living in Santa Barbara. I just didn't know where. But I said to my wife, we had an anniversary trip that we had coming up. And she said, where do you want to go? I said, I want to go to Santa Barbara. And she said, okay, why? I said, because I want to meet Jonathan Winters. And she said, how are you going to do that? I said, I don't know, just let me figure it out, So we went to Santa Barbara for the weekend, and I went to the main street in Santa Barbara. This is all 100% true. And she gave me an hour or something. She said, I'll give you an hour to pursue this nonsense, and then you have to have a nice weekend with me. And I said, fine. And I just stood there, and as everybody walked, because I barked for stage time, but people, if you know what that is I stood in Times Square for years trying to get people to come into shows, strangers on the street, in order to get stage time. So I'm no stranger to talking to strangers on the street.
Right.
So I know how to do it. So I just channeled those skills, and I stood there in the middle of the busy street in Santa Barbara, and I said to everyone as they passed by, instead of like, do you want to see a comedy show? I just said, do you know Jonathan Winters? Until somebody gave me a lead,
Wow.
And they said, I don't know him, but I know he shops in that store. So I went to that store, and I said, do you know him? And they said, who? And this is great, by the way. I said, Jonathan Winters is a comedian. I heard he shops here. It was an antique shop. And the guy said, I don't know who that is. I said, oh, I pulled up my iPhone. I typed into Google Images, Jonathan Winters. And I showed him an image, and I said, this guy. And he goes, that guy's a comedian? I said, yeah.
That's great.
He calls the other guy over. He goes, hey, whatever the guy's name is. Ryan, come here. You got to see this. He goes, you see that guy? That guy's a comedian. They go, well, that explains it. I said, explains what? They said, this guy, we don't know what his deal is. He comes in here. Sometimes he's dressed like a firefighter, and sometimes he's dressed like a plumber. And he's always like, a different thing. We never knew what he was or anything. I said, so, can you tell me how do I find him? He says, let me look him up in our system. So he pulls him up, and he sees the address, and he says, I can't give you his address because that's, unethical and all that. But he says, I'll tell you, he lives in Montecito Village. So I hope that helps you. So I went to Montecito Village, and eventually I wound up meeting Jonathan Winters, and but it's a crazy story even from there how it happens. So I wrote a book about it.
I got to get the book just to find out. So when you go to Montecito Village,
yeah,
and what, are you just walking around and then you see him, or did you have to knock on doors, or did you ask anybody else?
Well, I don't give away the whole book, but I'll tell you a little more of what happens. I see a guy working on an old man working on an old car, and I thought, old man, old car. Jonathan Winters, an old man. He collects old things, and I think he's really into old cars. This guy might know him. So I said, I pulled over, and I rolled my window down. I said, excuse me, do you know where Jonathan Winters lives? And he says, I don't know where he lives, but I always see him at the La Fontaine coffee shop. He plays dominoes there or something sometimes in the morning, and they probably would have better answers for you. So I went there, and I talked to the baristas, and I said, do you know Jonathan Winters? They said, who? And I showed them the picture on my iPhone, and they said, that guy, he comes in the mornings. We're the afternoon shift, but he does come. He sits and plays dominoes. And then my wife says, all right, we're really out of time here. We gotta wrap this up. And so I threw a Hail Mary, and I just yelled to the whole coffee shop, if you're ever on a New York subway and the guy gets on to the car and he just yells to everybody, excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, I just did that in the middle of the coffee shop. I said, excuse me, everybody. And everyone looked up from their laptops and their coffees and their conversations. And I said, I'm a young comedian, and I'm a big fan of the comedian Jonathan Winters, who I understand comes regularly to this coffee shop. If anyone can help me to meet him, this is my last chance to meet him. I'm only here for another 2 days or a day or so. I said, can anybody help me? And nobody replied, and everybody went right back to what they were doing. But then somebody followed me out to I went to the car, like, defeated, and somebody came out and said, Jonathan's my neighbor, and he's very sick, and I'm sure he'd be touched that you want to meet him. I'll let him know that it meant the world to you. And I'm not going to tell you what happens after that.
Wow.
But
yeah.
but it's not what you think.
Wow.
How I wound up meeting him. It's kind of wild what happened. The next part is all God, because it's impossible that it would have happened otherwise.
That's super cool. If for everyone watching this, if you want to find out the ending, you got to go to the website there, fairenoughcomic.com.
Yeah.
Get your comic book, get all 5 issues, and I'm already ordering them because
It's very nice. Yeah.
I think it's gonna be awesome, and I'm got to find out the ending of all of these.
And the 5th book that I put out was about just my experiences, going to Costco and getting free samples. So they're all very different, the books are,
It's like very similar, like you said, to like Harvey. Sometimes he would have just, like just one day, one moment, one thing he did, and things like that. So it's
right.
What's super cool too about you is that, you're like this regular guy who figured it, like with talking to Harvey Pekar, led you to the comical, which led you to talking to all these legends, which led you to these interviewing skills and writing skills, and then you find out how to investigate and go and find within an hour find out where Jonathan Winters lives, and so I think it's pretty awesome where the road can lead you to,
Right.
from this random call to Harvey Pekar because your grandmother told you to go, forced you to go see this movie,
Right.
to all of a sudden here you are now, you've met and interviewed some of the greatest comedians ever,
Right.
Jackie Mason, Carlin, Shelley Berman, Mark Schiff, your partner in crime over there, Jerry Seinfeld, Jay Leno, the list goes on and on of the icons that you are friends with,
Right.
and how does it, when you look back at the road all the way to that day when your grandmother bought you the ticket to the movie, like how does that feel now when you're looking back at it?
Well, I'm still struggling financially, so I wish you would have got me a ticket to a movie about a guy who made more money.
Like Wolf of Wall Street or something.
Yeah. I think Harvey died poor. I should have been inspired by somebody else. No, you're right. It's interesting. Like life takes you on these journeys, and you don't know. Like that George Harrison song, when you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there.
Yeah.
So that's basically been it. I've never known where I'm going, and any road has taken me there. So, I don't know. I've never. I think anyone listening would be smart to not do what I did, and to come up with a plan, and then execute that plan to a desired result.
Right.
I never had a plan. My plan was always just to be good at what I like to do, like to be a great comedian, to be a great podcaster. I never had a goal in mind. And every time people say you should make a goal and work towards the goal, I've never been able to do that. I don't know. My mind doesn't work that way. I just kind of follow my passions. And then, I'm not unsuccessful, but, I think I could have probably been much more successful if I had done that. So I would recommend to anybody listening, sure, follow your passions and definitely become good at what you want to become good at, but probably do the missing piece in my life and make a plan and a goal with a desired outcome and do that instead of meandering aimlessly through life as an artist, which is what I've done. I have many goals. Like I've got many goals. Like right now I'm working towards making my first comedy special. That's what I'm trying to do right now.
Nice, man.
My goals are always like project goals. I don't have big picture goals. So I would say get big picture goals for people. Yeah. Maybe your big picture goal should be to be in big pictures. I don't know.
There you go. Get in the picture business, son.
Yeah, get in the pictures.
Yeah, I think I struggle with the same thing, man. To actually have a plan and work towards the plan, like a business plan or whatever. And it, I think there's something to the artist's brain where we just can't go through a format. It's like right. I think artists, a lot of artists or think like it's like Picasso painting in the head. Everything's just random and you and then you just go with I'm focused now on the comic books, or I'm focused now on the podcast, or I'm focused on this. But it's hard to stay on course on one thing. Right. That's what I struggle with anyway. Just to stay focused.
I agree. I feel the same way. But I mean, I don't want to sound too self-deprecating. I've done a lot of cool things. I've gotten to tour all over the world. I've put out a concert film, which is on Amazon Prime Video. Just came out this year. It's called Reconquistador. I've done a lot of things. I just think if I was focused, I could have done a lot more things, But it's not too late. I'm still trying to figure it all out.
Do you get advice when you're interviewing Jay Leno, or when you're interviewing or talking to Seinfeld, or even Mark Schiff, your partner, and We Think It's Funny, which I love that podcast, and you guys get the best guests and all that. But do these guys ever kind of take you under the wing, or just be like, hey, kid, you should try it this way, or do it that way, or do you ever think to do it like this? Or
Mark Schiff is the best advice guy I've ever met. I get a lot of advice from him, even before we did the podcast together. I wish I took it all, but even the small percentage that gets through my fat skull that I actually do has always been incredibly beneficial. So, I do get nuggets of wisdom from everybody. Like what I was talking about with the plan, it was something that was very, I don't know the word. Sometimes I have good words but they're not available to me when I need them.
I hear that.
The one thing that stuck out for me from the Jay Leno interview was that he had a plan, and that he executed his plan to get where he was, and like it wasn't all random. He was very calculated. He was very diligent and very focused, very focused on meeting the goals that he had set out for himself. He showed up a day early for the interview to scout out what the parking situation would be and how long it would take him to drive there. To be interviewed by me and Mark after he had the Tonight Show, like that is a level of work ethic that I was just so impressed by. Like I can't. It's unreal. It's unreal because like, and it was really what he did. He said, I said to him, I said, you must have been in the neighborhood or something, and you're like, oh, I'll check out where it is. He goes, no, I drove out there to just to see, how long it would take. I don't want to be late, and see what the driving situation is and the traffic and parking. And I said, so you came all the way to my house, which was a long drive for him. I said, you came all the way to my house just for that the day before? And he looked at me like I'm crazy, and he goes, yeah, well, why wouldn't I? I said, sure, why wouldn't you? And then Mark had the funny line. He says, Jay's flying to Italy tomorrow because he's got a gig there in a month. He wants to see how long it's worth it.
They don't like guys like Jay Leno, you know what I mean, with that kind of work ethic and down to earth. Like you said, this is a guy that was the host of the Tonight Show, and it doesn't get much bigger than that in that time period, especially. He preceded podcasting and all that stuff, and he was one of the last of the great ones on the late night circuit, and he seems to be a real lunchbox kind of guy, even despite the fact that he's got this crazy, car collection, and he does live, an eccentric life, but he still seems like a regular guy. It's weird.
Right. Well, I think he's like an insane genius savant. That's also what I got from him. Like him, the late great Ralphie May, who I used to work for. Yeah. There are some people who are just on a different plane with their thinking, with their understanding of the world. Like Jay Leno, I don't think people understand it because maybe they just are looking at the jokes, which are good jokes, but the man, the brain behind this career, this act, everything, the brain on this guy is other level. He's like a Mensa genius or something. So was Ralphie. I mean, I was once backstage in a theater with Ralphie. I used to open for him for years. May he rest in peace.
Yeah, he was one of the greats, man. God bless.
And we were smoking weed, which I don't do a lot. I don't like it. I don't like things that mess with my head like that.
Right.
I get paranoid and all that stuff. I'm not a good drug doer. But he used to love it, and I remember he was like, I don't want to say it in an insulting way, but I don't know if there's another way to put it. Remember that scene in Star Wars where they go into the bar? There's the big guy and he's smoking the hookah. What's his name?
Jabba the Hutt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I look at Ralphie. He's like this big guy just surrounded by smoke, And he just starts pontificating the most brilliant stuff. And it wasn't because I was high, because I'd been high with him many times. But I say not a lot and many times, but many times with him, but not a lot in my life.
Right. Yeah.
So, but he starts saying the most brilliant things. And he said this lots of times when I wasn't high, too. He was just a brilliant guy. He'd just say things that were just like, what? Wow. How did you? And he was just saying all these things that were just like genius level things. And I looked at him and I said, Ralphie, I said, I loved his act. He was hilarious. I said, but listen, the level of intelligence that you have versus the level of intelligence that you bring to the stage, there's a big disparity there. I said, why don't you? I said, you're a genius. You're like an actual genius. I said, why don't you talk about some of this high concept stuff like this, like in your act? And he looked at me. He told me, he said, it's not marketable. He said, I appeal to a mass audience. I appeal to the everyman. I'm going for America. I'm not trying to get some academic, intellectual, elitist crowd. He says, I would like to talk to everybody. He said, and he used to call the American public the sheeple. He said the sheeple aren't ready for this kind of thing. He says you got to give the sheeple what they want. He goes, so I realized something about Ralphie in that moment, which is that he deliberately and intelligently dumbed himself down to meet the biggest mass audience that he could reach.
Right.
So, like, he was just smart enough on stage to be very smart and just dumb enough on stage to have mass appeal. That's a very high level of calculation, because he could have been he was purposefully limiting himself in a way that would essentially not limit himself.
Right.
Not limit his audience. He was so smart that he knew exactly where to turn the dial to reach the most people in the funniest, best way. It still blows my mind.
Yeah, it's crazy to hear that he was that, brilliant, but also smart enough, like you said, to not dumb it down, because I think the jokes were still clever, but they were clever like in a streetwise way. Like he took his genius and maybe transformed it into the street wisdom, but the jokes all kind of came out super clever, and like his perspective on everything was kind of unique.
100%. And nothing was accidental there. Like, he wasn't just like, some guy who just got up and was accidentally super funny. He was very clever, very calculated, very sharp with all his writing, with everything. Jackie Mason, Jay Leno, Carlin, Ralphie, all guys that just functioned on a different plane, or function. Like Leno was telling me about when it came to guest hosting the Tonight Show. He would take, I think, $700 scale to get guest host.
Wow.
And I think it was the Brillstein people called him up and they said, "Hey, listen, we're getting Gary Shandling and Paul Reiser and all these guys $20,000 an episode to guest host. Let us negotiate for you. You'll be getting way more money." And he said, like, he realized, and he said, "No, thank you." And he said, "Because I realized that Johnny Carson owned the production. So the money was coming out of Johnny's pocket. And at the end of the month, when they crunch the numbers and they say, oh, we spent $60,000 on Reiser, and we spent $100,000 on Shandling. And look at this, we only spent, $2,000 on Leno.
Right.
Let's use him more." And I realized it'd be more valuable to me to undercut the price of everybody dramatically so that they used me more, so that I would have, in the long run, a better shot of getting the show or something. So, like, that's a very high level of thinking,
That's long-term thinking. That there used to be a term for that, like, don't step over $1 to pick up the quarter, And I think he saw that he could make more money in the long run if he just kind of,
he picked up the quarter.
Yeah.
To get to the dollar or something.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Right.
Reverse, but
yeah, something.
But it's just, but that's just a very clever, to stop and think, who owns the show? How much is it costing them to have them and this and that? Let me stay super cheap, and do a great job. Wow, very smart. Nobody else was thinking that, obviously.
Right. They were all wanting the fast money, the quick money.
As smart as Paul Reiser and Gary Shandling are, and they're brilliant, like, that didn't occur to them.
Right.
Yeah. So I really think Leno, like I said, Jackie Mason, Leno, Carlin, and Ralphie May are these four guys that I knew. I know I knew a lot of brilliant comedians, but these guys weren't just brilliant comedians. They were just brilliant, period.
Right.
Like, they were just, like, super, super highly intelligent, people. I don't know.
And they all left behind an amazing bodies of work, I mean, like, Ralphie May had some of the funniest stuff. I remember him on Last Comic Standing. And then after that, he had his own specials and things like that on Comedy Central and stuff like that. And he was definitely... I remember one thing he did. I forget what the joke was, though. He came out... I think it might have been on The Tonight Show. He came out and fell down, and they stood up real quick. And then
on Kimmel, It was the best save ever.
Yeah. What was the save again? Because I guess seen it not too long ago.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I'll
but
play
I remember
it.
It was brilliant. Like, he was so fast. He was so sharp.
They said break a leg, so I gave it a shot. I gave it a shot. Finally, this show's funny. Okay. You're welcome. It's good to be here tonight. I enjoyed my trip.
You know, like, here's a guy who was over 500 pounds at one point, maybe more, on drugs, on pills, on weed, on food.
Yeah.
He had, like, all these different forces to slow him down. He was still sharper than almost anybody I've ever met. Like,
That's
can you
crazy.
imagine if he was sober? Like, can you even imagine if he was sober? Like, he was too smart for the world, I think. I think maybe that's also why I think he was just too smart for this world.
That's a good point. He dumbed down his act. He had to dumb down himself.
Yeah, he was just, I guess I got to really know him. I toured with him. I interviewed him. I worked for him. I got to really know him. And I can tell you that, like, he was able to see the world in such a very nuanced way. Intricate thinker. I wonder if that's what did him in, you know? It's probably very lonely to be that smart.
Yeah. That's what I tell my family all the time about me. I say it's very lonely to be as smart as I am, family. And no, but yeah, I think with Ralphie, it is a tragic ending to a genius. And there's so many of that we see in comedy. So many of the great comedians go too soon, man. And to have a friendship with somebody like Ralphie May, have you ever thought about doing one of a book on him?
Yeah, I will do a book on him, but it'll be a big book. I think it's a lot to say. I have a lot to say, and I haven't figured out exactly how I would structure it, but I know that it would not be a regular size comic book. It would have, like Ralphie, it would be bigger than everything, you know.
That's
and
great.
myself, I suppose, as well. So, it would be big. It would be a big book. So that's a big project. But I will do it, I hope,
Yeah, man. Well, dude, and everybody's got to get these comic books. I'm like I said, I'm going to order them now. You got the 6th one you're working on now. Every book is a different artist, right?
Every book's a different artist, and this new book will be 3 artists because of the barbecue restaurant. But yeah, they're all great artists. Josh Meatbag Meat did the 2nd one. I love his style. He's an artist from Minneapolis. He's got this really gritty kind of. I just love his style. Ellie Ziv did the 5th book, which was an incredible style. I mean, they're all great. Josh Spooner did the Thanksgiving issue, and this guy Albert Greker. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but he did like a bonus comic in that issue, which was about just an encounter I had at the Beverly Center with my wife and
Nice.
and some Dutch people. But this guy Nico Toren did the Jonathan Winters book, and he's terrific. So they're all great. They're all great artists that I got to work with.
This is awesome, man. And again, Danny, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. I'd love to have you back on because I know that you're, a stand-up comedy nerd like myself, and you probably know a lot about comedy history, and I would just love to one day go through that with you.
Sure,
That would be
let's
awesome.
do it.
Yeah, man. But tell everybody again where they could find you, follow you, find the podcast and the comic books. And I'm going to put it all in the description as well. But
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'll give you the quick rundown. Daniel Lobell on the social media platforms. We Think It's Funny as the podcast. And you can find that on YouTube, Spotify, all the podcast places. The film is called Reconquistador. It's on Amazon Prime Video, and it's about me going to Spain and tracing my roots and doing comedy in Barcelona. And then the comic books are all available at fairenoughcomic.com.
awesome. Danny, you rock, man. Thank you so much. Everybody check him out. This was great, man. I'm looking forward to read these books and definitely getting you back on because we got so much more to talk to you about, man.
Thanks so much, John.
Danny Lobell, everybody. Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Bye.